The Swedish foreign minister made comments Monday about the Paris attacks, implying that if there would just be a solution to the Palestinian issue, then the swamps of terror could be drained. She's not alone in that sentiment, obviously. How do you respond to that?
It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the sources of terrorism. The Middle East is disintegrating. States are disappearing. Iraq no longer exists. Syria no longer exists. Yemen no longer exists. Libya doesn't exist any longer. And so many other countries are in upheaval. That is not coming because of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is a subset, not a particularly important one, of this general upheaval. The upheaval and the source of this conflict is the battle between modernity and medievalism. Early medievalism, and very violent. That is shaking the Arab-Muslim world in a fundamental way. And these historic forces, which were bubbling underground and burst to the surface, they were contained for a century by a system of authoritarian states. First by a colonial system, and then post-colonial authoritarian state system. That is broken down, and all these forces are bursting through the sand, through the cracks, and dislocating the Middle East and North Africa as we know them, and having a huge impact on Europe and many other lands. That's the source of the conflict. Within that, there is a battle that is ongoing for about a century between the Jewish national movement and the Palestinians who refuse to accept it. The source of that is the persistent refusal to accept a Jewish polity, Jewish sovereignty in any border. Lately, this Palestinian rejectionism is fused with militant Islam. You see that in that half the Palestinian people are now governed in Gaza by militant Islamists. Sunnis aligned with Iran, doing Iran's bidding. Islamic Jihad, doing Iran's bidding. And the other half refuses to fight the first half and refuses to make its final peace or bury the hatchet with Israel. So the larger picture, modernity against medievalism. In our part of the Middle Eastern woods, the persistent refusal to accept Israel in any border. These are facts. For a long time, the larger picture was subsumed by our own conflict, and people said things that were incredibly stupid. They said that the conflict in the Middle East, conflict, always in the singular, the core of the conflict in the Middle East was the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's ridiculous. It always was ridiculous, but it's particularly ridiculous today. And I'll tell you, that I think most people understand by now. I mean, there are some true believers walking around in, I don't know, certain academic circles and apparently some diplomatic circles, but they're few. And yet, it's particularly obnoxious, you know, when they accuse us, the victims, of the terrorism that is leveled against us. We're not to blame. 100 years of terrorism leveled at us with the purpose of destroying us. We're not to blame, any more than the people of Paris are to blame for the attacks that have been leveled against them. Okay? So obviously we reject that. But now there's a new twist. It's not merely that we are to blame for the terrorism that is directed against us. We are to blame for the terrorist that is directed against them in Paris. Now that's a level of absurdity that is almost comic if it weren't so tragic. We reject both.
But how about the premise